So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ganesh Kumar of HPB Lodge, Auckland. Ganesh was originally from India and has a bachelor's degree in mathematics, an engineering degree in instrument technology, and a master's in mechanical engineering. He first joined the Theosophical Society in Zambia in 1980 and transferred to HPB Lodge, Auckland in 1995, and continues to take part in the Lodge and some New Zealand section activities. He's presented in TSNZ Branches and also online for overseas programs. And I've known Ganesh for a long time now, and it's great to have him here. So Ganesh will be talking today about HPB's role in the formation of the TS and our Dharma today as its members. So Ganesh, over to you. Thank you.
Dear sisters and brothers, namaskaram and greetings. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I also wish to thank the President and the committee members of the Wellington Lodge for giving their approval and opportunity for me to give this talk. Before we proceed further, I have a couple of things to share with you. The first thing, I have a strong accent. And if you do not understand my talk, or if my talk becomes somewhat gibberish, I could understand your frustration. I'll try my best to be more comprehensible and if necessary, repeat my statements. However, we might have some time after the talk for any clarifications. Another confession that I like to make is that what I am sharing with you is my reflection, interpretation, understanding, and conviction of the information that I have studied in books or talks and lectures that I have listened to. I would like you to be part of the present discussion with an open mind. Irrespective of your previous views and convictions, and request you to kindly seek out the truth for yourself so that the final conclusion is your own and not that of somebody else's, including my own views, which I suggest that you take with a pinch of salt, rather more than a pinch of salt, neither rejecting nor accepting instinctively any of the statements that is being presented. I just wish to describe few concepts before we go into discussing HPB's role in the formation of the Theosophical Society. And I want you all to keep them at the back of your mind. The first, scenery. Once I was stuck in the traffic in the Auckland motorway with a high-rise apartments just adjacent to the motorway, sitting in my automobile, and there was nothing I could do about the jam except think about the traffic jam. I could see only a short distance in front of me or behind me through my rear view mirror or around me as to what was happening. Whereas a person, I imagine, situated on the top of a high-rise building closer to the motorway could see much further into the traffic as to why it is stagnant and how far it would affect the traffic as well as the bottleneck or the accident that is affecting the free flow. And perhaps a person who is observing the traffic jam from a helicopter or with a drone at a much higher altitude might get a bird's eye view and could see even things that might happen in the near future with a possibility of corrective actions to prevent the traffic jam. So, as a person sitting inside the car I could see only the present, whereas the person in the helicopter, that is the one who has a greater and wider view, a view in which the past, the present, and even the future is just an open book. And everything is just the present, the eternal now. The second part that we wish to consider is evolution and nature. Evolution is an accepted fact. As June was pointing out, it was not so in 1850s when the theory of evolution the book was published by Charles Darwin. So evolution is an accepted fact, not only in some religions, but also in the modern day science. That convinces me that amongst the human beings, there must be some who have attained the highest level of all imaginable faculties that are within the capability of human beings. In every age, culture, and national history, these men of power and compassion have been called as elders, magis, hierophants, wise men, elder brothers, seers, prophets, initiates, adepts, masters, gurus, rishis, mahatmas, etc. And then when you think about the nature, most of us, including the scientists, usually say that any phenomena that cannot be logically or scientifically explained is due to nature. But neither do they understand it nor explain the forces and intelligence that is behind the so-called nature, the hidden laws of nature. It reminds me of a scene described by one of our theosophical writers about some aliens visiting our earth. And these aliens, they could see everything on this earth except the human beings. And they would be astounded the way in this world was functioning, because the cars, trains, aircraft, etc., they are moving automatically and operating efficiently. New buildings coming up automatically. All these activities happening without any intervention by anyone, calling it as the nature of this planet called Earth. If you say that there is a certain quality, there must be also a substance behind that quality. Let me repeat that statement. If you say that there is a quality, there must be also a substance behind that quality, because a quality cannot exist on its own. For example, if you talk about a pleasant smell, there must be a flower or some incense spreading that fragrance. Similarly, if there is intelligence and power in the so-called nature, there must also be something or some beings who are the source of that intelligence and power. Hence, as the source of power and intelligence of the so-called nature, some highly evolved beings must be behind the functioning of not only this earth, but the entire cosmos, which we call as nature. Hence, we may conclude that these highly evolved beings living in our world, even at the present time, possess not only a thorough working knowledge of the outer visible and the inner invisible worlds, but are able to see the past, the present, and the future of the evolution inside and upon this earth, and are guiding the evolution of this planet according to the divine plan. Hence, we might conclude evolution is a fact. And the universe is guided by immutable laws with its administrative agencies, adepts or a reality. And finally, the adepts or the agents of execution of this grand divine plan. Now, let us look with the above concepts in the background as to the reason for the formation of the Theosophical Society in the 19th century. The founding of the Theosophical Society in 1875 was described as an experiment. It is also recorded that the Theosophical Society was inspired by some enlightened beings, and H.P. Blavatsky and Colonel H.S. Alcott were chosen as the building agents of the society. The natural question arises is as to why should it be termed as an experiment? Why did they call the formation of the Theosophical Society was an experiment? Probably we'll have to think about it. The advancement of science made the West to believe entirely upon the materialistic view of the life, thereby completely ignoring the true spiritual aspects. And the West, which was the leader of the world's economic and scientific development, was tending towards the wrong belief that spirituality was nothing but conversations with the dead through mediums or in seances. The enlightened beings saw where the world was in the previous centuries and where it would be end up in the future if it continued without any course correction. Like a person in the helicopter who could see the traffic jam and then actually could initiate any corrective action, these enlightened beings realized that the human race needed a nudge towards the right path to instill certain universal guiding principles like the brotherhood into the minds of people in general to save the human race from self-destruction. The objective was to initiate a definite plan, to lift the corner of the veil of their life's deeper mysteries, to enlighten the possible capability and competence of humanity as a species, to chart their own progress, to provide agents in the outer world who would understand the divine plan in a general way and thus consciously cooperate in the work for the betterment of the world, to give humanity certain deeper truths of the life which are needed for taking the next step in human evolution. Hence, it was decided that the revelations of some of the specific teachings of the ancient hidden wisdom that we call modern theosophy, which would steer the humanity in the right direction, be made available to the Western world, and through that, to the rest of the world. A world which was blindly and faithfully following the Western world in all spheres of endeavor. A Westerner was in need, and it was said that they were in search for the right person for more than 5 centuries. It makes us wonder as to the reason that they have to search for more than 5 centuries to find the right person. What kind of person they were searching? We do not know. Perhaps we could comprehend the qualities that they might have expected in this special person to bring this message to humanity by looking at the life of HPB. One of the former international presidents of our society, Gina Rajadasa, has said, to understand HPB's heroic nature, we must remember a few facts, which perhaps are not to be found in any published book. Occult tradition states that after her training in Tibet under her master, she was sent out, and what then seemed to be a lost hope. In 1870, when she started on her mission, materialism was the gospel of life. She was given the work of stemming the tide of materialism with the occult knowledge which she possessed. She was not told how the work was to be done, except that in 1874, she was informed that a certain Henry Steele Olcott would assist her in her job. But as she went to do her work, she knew quite well the awful sufferings in store for her. She knew that she would be considered a fraud, a trickster, be vilified, and that in every possible way her name would be dragged in the mud. She knew that she would have to do many things using the occult forces, and since she was not able to reveal all the truth concerning these forces, her actions would often appear suspicious and fraudulent. She had made a pledge, and in the face of this, the destiny of misunderstanding and persecution, she achieved her goal. It is this intense devotion to the cause of humanity and the unswearing loyalty to the orders of her masters which stand out in her character. Her health was wretched and she suffered terribly. But yet never for one moment did all her agonies make her forget the pledge she had given to lead the lost hope, forlorn hope. Even in 1885, when the attack on her by the Christian missionaries caused her agonies and she lay dying, she did not forget her work. Her master appeared and offered her the choice of dying and relief from her miseries, or of living on with a broken health in order that an epic piece of work for mankind, the writing of the secret doctrine, might be done. He showed her the pictures of the impending sufferings of her, but she chose to suffer once again rather than leave her work for mankind unfinished. The strenuous task of establishing the Theosophical Society has never put 1 cent in her pocket, but has consumed thousands of her earned money and that of Colonel Olcott for many years. She never achieved any fame except abuse and ridicule, and lost many of her best friends. As we understand all the details of her life and work, HPB will be recognized as one of the greatest heroes of humanity. It is this unflinching loyalty of hers to a great cause which ever fascinates us. We may enumerate her qualities as follows. Number 1, spirit of sacrifice. She was not like people who would work for the cause for a couple of years, but she sacrificed her entire life for the cause. In spite of severe constraints and difficulties, she worked for the well-being of the entire humanity and not for the sake of rewards of power, fame, or wealth. The second aspect, work above self. She was a person with very strong will who, when surrounded by difficulties and particularly by humiliation, considered less of the personal self and more of the work for the humanity. And the third quality, personal integrity. She was not a person who propagated the wisdom by what she learned and listened, but one who had the audacity to undergo the severe training needed to acquire the hidden powers of nature with the honesty and integrity of not using them for personal gain. That means even though she had the powers to cure herself when she was sick, she did not use any of those powers on herself. And she suffered while writing the secret doctrine. And the last one, change of century of old superstitions. She was a person who brought to the humanity of the previous centuries immersed in materialism the notion that things beyond the physical or things of real importance in human life. Sorry. HPB's unflinching fidelity to the great mission, her strong and fearless nature were the keynotes of her life, which could not make her deviate from her mission in spite of humiliation or misrepresentation. To HPB, the true and inner meaning of theosophy was an ever-present power in her life. And she was ceaseless in her endeavors to spread the knowledge of the living truth, so that by the ever-widening influence of theosophy, the wave of materiality in science and religion might be checked, and a real and lasting spiritual foundation laid for the true progress and brotherhood of mankind. Theosophical Society was formed to assist in showing to the human species that such a thing as theosophy exists, and to help human beings to study and assimilate its eternal principles. Theosophy is the science of life, which can never die, because life or truth can never die. The reason as to why the Theosophical Society was called as an experiment, I think this is the time we have to find out. It was due to the fact that this work of realizing the brotherhood of the living beings cannot be done by the enlightened ones, or what we call as the so-called nature, but it has to be done by each one of us individually and collectively. We, as the members of the society and champions of this truth, must ever bear the heaviest of all responsibilities. The effort so to shape our own characters and lives that truth may thereby be stated to others. Most fortunately, HPB has left the work on a firm and fully organized foundation for us. Our true aim and duty are our Dharma as friends of HPB and members of the society who are gathered to remember her passing should be to dedicate ourselves to continue the work that HPB pursued with such complete unselfishness and singleness of motive. Enthusiasm, self-sacrifice, and determination to restore to mankind the knowledge of those great spiritual truths that we call as theosophy today. Only by carrying the flame lit by HPB and passing it on to our future generation, we can show our gratitude to her and our appreciation of the great task she has committed to us. Theosophical knowledge is a legacy that we must pass on to a future generation in its pristine condition. Members, brothers, and sisters, thank you for your patient listening. And I wish you all a very happy White Lotus Day celebrations at your lodges and study centers tomorrow. That is the 8th May. And also a happy Mother's Day. Just as Valian was mentioning in the beginning of her talk, she called HPB as the mother of the spiritual, modern spirituality. And then we can say she is also the mother of what we call as the present day Theosophy. So let us celebrate her day tomorrow and today. Thank you. Thank you for your patient listening. Namaste.
Thank you, Ganesh. Fantastic. Open to questions, comments. Yes, so raise your hand either digitally or physically if you have a question or want to make a comment. Oh, Chris is here.
Chris, you have to unmute. Apologies. Thank you, Ganesh. Very inspiring. Really, really enjoyed that. And it gave me so many thoughts while you were speaking, especially when you were speaking about her lifetime of sacrifice, because I thought of the one whom many of us are familiar with, the life of the Master Jesus. And we understand that it was really only in the last 3 years of his life over his ministry that with the people that he really, his initiation came into the process, and that was when he suffered and made the sacrifices in order to bring that message to mankind, or to humankind. So I thought about that when you were speaking. In comparison, you know, this woman, from a very young woman, sacrificed an ordinary life in full knowledge of what it was going to cost her. And you spoke about that time when she could have been released a little earlier and she chose not to. So it's very, very inspiring. And it just brought to my mind one of the things we speak of in the society is being of service. And right from the very beginning, those words to me were very significant. And while you were speaking, I was thinking about being of service in the society, which is about organizing meetings and making the tea and getting the food organized and opening the building and cleaning it and all of those things that we do. And as our part of our service to the society, to provide a forum where we can actually share the knowledge that we have the privilege of having had revealed. But, you know, when you look at those things, and many people do make quite big sacrifices in order to be available to do those things. But when you look at the service that we give and compare it to Madame Blavatsky and what she gave to us, you know, it really looks very trivial. And it might make us think about the times when we maybe could feel that something was imposing on our other life, so to speak, and something might have been a bit too much trouble. So just bringing that home to us. Thank you very much, Ganesh.
Thanks, Chris.
Just reminds me, I read somewhere that she was given a bag of gold coins or something like that for use to establish the Theosophical Society, but she never ever touched that fund. But she had to make some cravats, I mean, the ties or something like that, or she was taking some tuitions or something like that. She made the money to meet the expenses of the Theosophical Society.
Okay, anyone else? Please take your hand down, Chris. Thanks. Ganesh, it's interesting in terms of, you know, having access to other funds. And Sushma told me the story about the master had given HPB some money that had to be given to another individual when she was in America for the work that this individual was going to do. Now, this individual was basically going to commit suicide because he'd been in debt X amount of funds. So HPB had to go at a certain time on a certain day, the exact moment when she knocked on this man's house, and she walked in and gave him the exact money that he needed to pay the debt that he was going to kill himself over. And she saw he had the gun and the bullets on the table. So she gave it to him, said nothing, and walked out the door. So even though she, because that individual had to live to carry on some work for the master, however, she had that money but couldn't use it. So, I mean, you're right. In full consciousness, she knew what was going to happen to our life. For us, we're stuck in the middle in your traffic jam. We don't know what's going to happen. She was up in the helicopter, could see exactly what was going to happen, and still did it anyway. So it's great that you inspire us to carry on the work, because I think C.W. Leadbeater said all we have to do is keep the door open in the lodge and the branch, keep it open so people can come in, and that is our role. That is our duty to carry on the work. So yeah, really, it's nice to be reminded of that. So thanks.
Just to add something, when HPB, he brought in the theosophy to the world population was much lower compared to what it is now. It's going to be 8 billion. And the number of people who have come to this knowledge is much less. I think we have got a much higher responsibility. We had to be much more proactive.
Okay, I'll just read a couple of comments before I go to you, June.
Yep.
So from Arnie, thank you, Ganesh, for highlighting the Dharma of the Theosophical Society. HPB never attempted any self-vindication. She chose to illuminate the human consciousness instead. From Susanna, what an inspiring talk in awe of HPB's strength of character. 5 centuries of waiting, and there she was. What a gift she is. Thanks, Kaz. June.
Yeah, in answer to Ganesh's comment, there are a number of times when Madame Blavatsky set up making flowers or cravats, or I think in one case shirts, or an ink factory to support herself. And I think it's in Countess Wachtmeister's book, there was a comment that a beggar came to the door and this woman was in tears because she couldn't support herself and her children. So Blavatsky just says, I'll give her the deeds of the ink factory. So, and this generosity has shown up in many occasions because her father had given her the money to go to America, and she had first-class cabins because when she could afford it, she did like to live in the luxury she was grown up in. But there was some poor woman there who had children with her who had found that the ticket she had bought with her last cent was fraudulent and she couldn't go on the ship. So Madame Blavatsky manages to arrange it so that her ticket paid for both that family and herself to go to America in steerage class, which is just about sardine box in the bottom of the ship. So yes, she was both. She had absolutely no knowledge of budgeting. In fact, it wasn't considered part of a woman's education to teach them anything mathematical or scientific or anything like that at that time. So there's also comments from Olcott later on that he did have to rein in her spending and give her an allowance at a time, because otherwise she'd either spend it. She bought land in America on one of her trips and he forgot where it was, or she'd give it away. So
yeah. Fascinating.
She did need a binder and an anchor person.
Thanks, June.
I'll take that down.
All our two are not good at budgeting, then we're in good company. Oh yes, okay. Vicky Jerome said, absolutely, Susanna, totally agree with your comment. Louise, 500 years to find someone. I hadn't heard that before. I so love the phrase you used at the end of carrying the flame. While HPB was before my time, I have had the privilege to learn from future generations of Theosophical students, and at times hold a small flame, and other times make that time for others. Thanks, Louise. It's interesting. Diane Morse, we don't know how because she won't let on. She has one of HPB's calling cards from HPB when she was alive. So I don't know how it got passed down in her family, and I've seen it physically and held it inside a plastic bag, of course, because she showed it at convention once. But she has one of HPB's calling cards, which is quite fascinating. Okay, any other comments, questions for Ganesh? Any other thoughts?
I hope I was not too loud and jarring. I do not know. Because I do not know. Somehow I have a very strong voice and loud voice, which I'm able to, I completely forget. Having been in the teaching profession for nearly a long time, when this kind of technical facilities were not available, I had been used to shouting. Even my daughter normally says, "Oh, don't talk so loud. We could hear you." So I'm sorry if I had been too loud, and if it had been some kind of what you call, I think, offended you. My apologies.
No. Chris.
Oh, thank you, Ganesh. I just wanted to assure you that I understood every single word you said. Your enunciation was perfect. And maybe because I'm a bit older, I appreciated the volume. I didn't find it too loud. It was very comfortable. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? It's fantastic, Ganesh, and also June. We're here to remember HPB and get inspired by her, and to hear, what she'd just done and how she lived. Would we be able to do the same? So, we do it what we can at our level, and we keep the door open. We do the work, and it's really, hopefully. The CW Leadbeater and Jinaraja Dasa, they said, when they passed away, that the masters, said you've done a good job, and that was all CWL and Jinaraja Dasa wanted to do as well when they passed, is to just get a pat on the back and say you've done a good job. For HPB to stay on when she could have died to do the job, do the work, it's quite amazing. Knowing that she's in this body and she can get out of it every night and be fully conscious, walk back to it the following morning and do the work. And it's interesting, I think after she passed, there's a wee story, and I think Sushma found it, but she could never find the book again in headquarters in the library, that CW Leadbeater had ran into her in a male body. He recognized her, and they said hello and exchanged a few words on the street. But Susha's never been able to find that book again. So, she obviously, maybe the next time around, didn't have to go through the whole growth phase and had a body that was 18, 19, 20 years old of a young man and went straight into it. So,
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I also read that HPB was a yogi in her previous incarnation. Things actually didn't come so easily. Probably she had the qualities developed in one of her previous incarnations, and she was used. In this particular lifetime, she completed her job, probably what she wanted to do earlier.
It's interesting in terms of just thinking about I've still got the comments up on the chat, what Louise said in terms of the previous generations. I was able to meet Matt Van Thiel, who you probably remember, Louise, from HPB, and you as well, Chris. He was one of Leadbeater's boys. He knew Leadbeater and drove him around when he was 16 in Sydney. So it was nice to be able to actually go and have meet those older members who'd had the good karma to meet the stalwarts of the society from those early days. And another lady, Peace Toon, saw Krishnamurti on the lawn at HPB when she was 18, speaking. So really great